Blackhawks fans, welcome to a brand new edition of the Four Feathers podcast. You might be wondering who the hell is this introducing the show. I am Ron Luce, just a hoarse version of myself. We got a full barn tonight here on the Four Feathers podcast. I am joined by Mr. Steve Kwiatkowski and Mr. Tony Marchese. Gentlemen, it's good to see you guys. It's been a while since we've all been on a microphone together. Happy post 4th of July. Happy post Ron's Christmas Day. How are you guys doing? How's everybody feeling a week into the month of July already?
Feeling great. It was a great holiday weekend. Did some barbecuing, had some hot dogs on the grill, and now just back to reality. It's Monday, grinding through it.
Sounds like a stint out of Eminem. Tony, how you feeling?
Yeah, I wish we were still back on the 4th of July holiday weekend. Ron, I know we got out there on the 4th of July. We hit a couple 2-tree golf balls together.
We did.
I think your golf game was phenomenal on Friday. You definitely helped get a couple of pars in that scramble. I'm mad about the 18th hole still, and I'm gonna be mad about it all year. But the rest of the weekend was as expected. Couple 2-3 beers here and there, watched a lot of baseball, did some grilling myself, Steve. I mean, it was a good weekend. I'm sad that it's over and we're back here on Monday, back to the grind, but it's good to be back on these airwaves and let's talk some Blackhawks hockey, boys.
It is good to be back with you guys. Yeah, we got out on the links. I'll tell you what, for all those at home, a tradition started with a bunch of my friends years ago. It's grown now. We had 5 foursomes collectively to start the day at this one golf course. I mean, it was a whole big event. It was a great time. We played best ball, see who can shoot the best. Our group came in second. It was myself, Mr. Marchese, and 2 of my good buddies, Mr. Noah Keene and Pat Hughes. Big shout out to those guys. Steve, you'll appreciate this. Every great hockey team, players have a role, right? Like all those great Blackhawks teams of the 2010s, Patrick Kane and and Patrick Kane and Patrick Sharp and Marian Hossa were the scorers, but like Taves and Hossa and Thod were the great two-way players, and Dunks and Steves were the lockdown defensemen, and Adam Burrish was the class clown and that gritty grinder and things like that. Noah and Tony were the big thumpers, right? They were the big scorers, getting us in elite positions to win, putting things in perspective. Then we had the fine twine of Pat Hughes, putting us in good positions, having good chipping and putting days. Then there was Ron Luce. I've never been so close to Adam Burrish in terms of my role on a team in my entire life. It was not to be out there to score. It was not to be out there to hit drives accurately. Son of a bitch, it was to keep the morale up at 7 o'clock in the morning when everybody else wanted to be sleeping. That was my job.
Oh, yeah.
I did the best I could. And we had a pretty damn good day as a result of it. It's a foursome I would happily golf with again. We talked about that at nauseum. It was a lot of fun. Gentlemen, I agree. It's a shame that the 4th of July is over. And largely, I think a lot, and I say a lot in quotations, a lot of the excitement for the NHL offseason has now come and gone. So now we get to reflect a little bit. Not to say there's not stuff that can't still happen between now and August, because there certainly will be things that happen. But now we can sit back and we can look at what the Blackhawks actually did. And free agency was quiet, very, very quiet. They signed Toninato. Steve, you wrote that one up, so I can happily give you the floor if you want to talk a little bit more about him.
Tomato, Toninato.
Yeah, Toninato. I had never heard of him before until the Hawks signed him, and that was just a AHL depth signing. So, yeah, a dude with a cool name, and he's probably going to be playing in Rockford.
Donato and Tonato. I love the rhyming scheme that KD's got going on the roster with a lot of their big additions. But gentlemen, I think that's something that we also have to remember too, right? Like Ryan Donato was re-signed so far in advance. He was kind of the big free agent get in a lot of ways. A 60-point scorer from the year prior, 30-goal scorer. instead of letting him leave and having to battle with other teams, they're able to lock him down and keep him in before free agency. But like Stolitz says here, the Hawks did diddly poo in actual free agency. And for some reason, I can't bring up the damn comment. I don't know why it's not working on my end. Maybe it'll work on your end, Mr. Tony. Thank you, sir.
I can see it. I can see it. I don't know if it's
see
up
it.
there for you now, but it's there.
Oh, beautiful. I can see it now as well. I don't know what was going on there. But yeah, they didn't do diddly poo. Rather, Kyle Davidson, for the third time in his short tenure as Blackhawks general manager, has acquired either the rights to or the player. Sam Lafferty is hashtag back, hashtag TWTW, hashtag grit in this Blackhawks locker room. I need to know what your guys' reactions were, because I think we were all literally in such wild places in the country, not even just in like our respective hometowns. What were your guys' reactions seeing that Sam Lafferty was once again a Chicago Blackhawk?
I'm going to be honest. When I first saw that, I mean, yeah, I thought it was funny, but I think I was a little pissed off, like seeing the same dude coming back to Chicago. I think we'll talk a little bit more about expectations for the Blackhawks going into free agency. I had realistic expectations, so I wasn't expecting like, Ehlers to come to Chicago. But when I saw Lafferty, I was like, come on, man, like that's not creative at all. But I remember, I think I messaged you guys, and then Ron, you kind of put things in perspective into my head. So it's funny seeing him back here and on the Blackhawks roster technically for the third time, I think. And yeah, I thought it was kind of funny.
If for no other reason, the content in itself is good as gold. Tony, what were your thoughts?
Sam Lafferty, he's a Four Feathers legend. For those that don't know, the TWTW hashtag grit, there's a meme that's out there from a couple 2-3 years ago that was created in honor of Sam Lafferty, that's run from this social media account at Four Feathers Pod over on X. Go follow us. All about Sam Lafferty, because we loved the way that he played the game. Like, just everything about Sam Lafferty was grit, and it was fun to watch. And so when you get a legend, a Blackhawks legend like Sam Lafferty back on your roster, I have to be happy about it. This isn't, the same retreats of going back and talking about Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, and we can all get mad at that. This isn't Stan Bowman going back to the cupboard over and over again. This is Kyle Davidson's stamp. Sam Lafferty is Kyle Davidson's guy. And for better or for worse, that name is going to be synonymous now with Kyle Davidson's tenure as GM of the Chicago Blackhawks in the early going. Now, I don't know how much impact Sam Lafferty is going to have on this team. Obviously, there's a lot of extra miles that have been put on Sam Lafferty since his last tenure here with the Chicago Blackhawks, but he does bring that grit. Kyle Davidson has really made it sort of known that he's going for some, more grit, more protection for some of the young stars on this team. But, I think Sam Lafferty's probably a guy that's going to fit in the lineup a couple, 2-3, games, and then probably ride the pine potentially in favor of some younger spots or some younger kids on the roster. But he's going to be in those games where you need a little extra sandpaper. So I'm not opposed to it. I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think he's stealing ice time from a ton of people. I don't mind it. Plus, he's a legend, and we get to bring back one of the Four Feathers podcast memes that we almost got to use the last time the rights to the player were acquired, and we were pretty happy that he was hashtag back. It seems like he might actually be hashtag back this time. Ronald, toss it back over to you. But sorry for the long history lesson there. I'm happy with it. It's Sam Lafferty.
It's a good history lesson that some need to learn about this show, especially newer followers that might be joining us along the way. I genuinely let out laughter when I saw Lafferty's return, and not in a bad way, just a I couldn't believe it way, that Kyle Davidson did it again and got Sam Lafferty back in the building for a third time. And for those that don't recall, the original trade was Alex Nylander for Sam Lafferty. That worked out really, really well for the Blackhawks with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Everybody recalls Lafferty's initial tenure with the Chicago Blackhawks. He was moved as a part of the Jake McCabe trade to Toronto, which yielded the Blackhawks one of their 2 first-round picks they had this season, among a bunch of other things that they acquired at the time, including that of Joey Anderson, who has been up and down over the last couple seasons now with the Blackhawks. And then he being Sam Lafferty, ends up in Vancouver with the Canucks, gets traded his rights because he was a free agent last year to the Blackhawks in that deal that acquired Ilya Mikheyev. A lot of people forget that was a part of the deal. Lafferty opted not to sign, maybe because of dollars, maybe because of opportunity, whatever it was. Goes to Buffalo, signs a 2-year contract, $2 million a year, no big deal. And then Buffalo, being the dumpster fire that they are, looking to get rid of the player, he ends up back in the arms of an angel that is Kyle Davidson. And it felt
In the
apropos
of an angel.
in the arms of an angel that is Kyle Davidson, because it works out too perfectly for them. I'll tell you this on a serious note, because again, I had time to reflect. I was a couple hours behind the rest of the country. Steve, I was on your time zone, actually. I was out in Northern California when this happened. And I got to sit there and mull it over by the pool, which is a great place to do some thinking. And this tells me a couple different things about, I think, what's going to happen with the Blackhawks this year. They're going to be a young team, but it's not going to be in the forward group. It's going to be on the blue line. It's going to be Sam Renzel. It's going to be Wyatt Kaiser. It's going to be potentially Artem Levchinov. It's going to be Ethan Dalmasho. It's going to be those youngsters, Nolan Allen, others that we'll see up and down throughout the course of the season. The veteran presence on this team is also not going to be a net, right? It's going to be Spencer Knight. It's probably going to be Arvid Soderblom, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in detail here in a few minutes. Maybe it's Laurent Brossoit. Maybe it's not. Who the hell knows? Most people forget that he even exists on this roster.
I was going to ask who Laurent Brossoit is.
He exists. He's a real person, believe it or not, and is on the Blackhawks payroll for at least one more year. But I think the biggest piece of this, it tells me that they want all those young forwards to go play in Rockford unless they just ball out and force them to put them on the roster. And I'm kind of okay with that. If nothing else, it's depth. Because friend of the program, very good friend of the program, Mr. Tab Bamford, wrote an article today kind of predicting lines and things like that. The only 2 young forwards not named Lucas Reichel that were mentioned in that were Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar. Otherwise, the forward group is all veterans, Sam Lafferty included. You can reunite that Sam Lafferty and Jason Dickinson PK group that was electric when they first got to Chicago together. I think it also just allows all these young kids to grow at their own pace. Sure, maybe Riley Green is ready for Ryan. Maybe Ryan Green is ready to be the 4th line center this year. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's ready to go down to Rockford and play top 6 minutes and develop that way. That's okay. Sam Lafferty can jump in and play 4th line center for you. Maybe he is ready, but Nick Foligno gets hurt or Lucas Reichel gets dealt or something else happens. You can move Sam Lafferty to the wing. It just gives them more flexibility. It gives them more depth on a veteran presence. And it allows some of these other young forwards, not named Bedard and Nazar, to develop at their own pace if they need more time in Rockford. Again, it's going to be a young Blackhawks team, but it's going to be more so on the back end than it is on the front end in the coming season. And I think that's what this kind of deal moves. And I think a lot of it too, the Hawks just didn't like a lot of the guys that were available. And they said, fuck it, let's go get a guy that we actually like and we know what he brings for effectively a flyer of a 6th round pick than to go and overspend and have to compete with everybody else in the free agency market for somebody who maybe doesn't fit their timeline as well as they would have hoped.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think looking at the comment, Stola Breezing, he said, I don't know how to do the little clicky thing, but he's talking about Victor Olofsson. I think that's kind of why it's right there. Victor Olofsson would be a decent add. Is Lafferty really a Wirtz? The way I'm looking at it
Yes,
is the all the press is pushing that the Blackhawks roster is going to be a young team next year. And you said it, Ron, where they're not going to be young in the forward core. It's all on the blue line. I think that needs to kind of be put out a little bit more by the reporters, because if I'm just taking it as face value of like this is going to be a young team, it really isn't, because like you said before, it's just Bedard and Nazar. So adding Lafferty, I do see where it's like, yes, he's a good depth signing. He can play the bottom 6 minutes. I personally, I like his game when he was here. However, not that Olofsson is going to like be the guy that makes or breaks Bedard's growth. He is a better player than Lafferty. So I would have liked to see a signing with like a Olofsson, or we'll talk about it in a little bit, but like Roslovic, like they're not like great players, but like they're better than Lafferty. And if the whole thing is like, I don't know, I like just looking at the roster, there's still holes. Like if we're playing Donato, who he did have a good season last year, he's not a true top six winger on a good team. Andre Burakovsky, he still has to show that he's going to be scoring again like he did. Even then, like, are we playing both of those players with Connor Bedard? I don't know. I still see that there's a hole on wing, which realistically wasn't going to get addressed through free agency, because it's not going to happen. But I don't know. I definitely get why people are upset. I definitely see the sense in the fact that there just isn't anybody worth signing in this free agency class. But it's I don't know. It's still early in the offseason. It's just not looking very much different from last year.
And I think that's the thing. Really quick, there's also an opportunity still for them to add probably another forward. I don't think it's totally out of the question. I just also don't think it's totally going to happen. And big shouts out to Skokes and Stole It here in the comments. We're going to get to a couple more of their comments here as the show moves on. Tony, your rebuttal, you wanted to add something to what Steve had to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's going to be a sensible level of frustration from fans with this offseason, because people are tired of the rebuild. Like, let's just not beat around the bush with this. You want to see improvement in the forward group, because it was sort of miserable at points in time watching this team play last year and the year previously. I think that that's more or less just sort of a byproduct of what I talked about last week, and sort of the goalposts did move based on the movement within the league, and that is teams locking up their own guys and having a weak free agency class. So you have to find out the best way to acquire this talent. I'm in the camp that believes, like, and you know this, Ron, I am probably the least patient person when it comes to waiting for this Blackhawks team to be good again. And I sort of just realized that, like, this is going to continue to be slow. It's not going to get better anytime soon. You're going to, if you see improvement from this team, it's because you get another solid year out of Teuvo Teravainen. Bertuzzi finds a way to add more impact on offense. Dickinson returns back to 2 years ago level of production. If Lucas Reichel is still on this roster, he needs to take a step forward. The additions, and nobody wants to hear this. This is like the most boring thing. And I sit here and I'm like, why do I want to invest my time into watching the same thing over and over again and hope to catch some lightning in a bottle? But you're going to need those guys to take steps. You're also going to need your star player. We talked about this with Patrick Kane, Ron, back in the day. You need your star to show up and be that guy. So if Connor Bedard isn't going to be that guy this year and still needs 2-3 years, and, you know, the whole talk online right now is, you know, Connor Bedard, where's his production? What, you know, people are so quick to label him, you know, but he's still been really productive. You need a superstar year out of him this year, next year, if you want to see that growth. I don't think it's just going to be a quick add in free agency that's going to shore this thing up, because we really haven't seen Kyle Davidson make that move yet. And I don't think that move is coming this offseason for even a trade for a huge impact person. It's all just going to be, piece work together, and hope that you see some progressive steps. But I also don't think this organization right now, as we stand with this roster, is going to be disappointed drafting in the top 3 again next season. I really don't think that they're going to have a problem with that. And I think that there's a misalignment between where the front office is at and where fans are at right now. And that normally spells disaster for attendance. It spells disaster for fan interest. So I think we're still not at the light at the end of the tunnel point here. And this free agency class sort of adds to that, and it moves the goalposts a little bit. Nobody wants to hear it. I don't want to hear it myself because I want this team back in the playoffs, and I want to enjoy watching Blackhawks hockey. But I think the joy that you're going to find is in that young defensive core this year. And you're also going to see some frustration with it too. But again, it just goes back to the fact that this isn't aligning with the timeline that the fans have, or we're told by the front office, a year ago from now, where they were going to take a step forward.
Yeah, I think it's hard though to sit here and comfortably be like, well, yeah, go add in this weak free agency class. Take away minutes from these young guys. Because what if Oliver Moore or Nick Lardis or Ryan Green are truly ready for NHL minutes? You add another forward to this group, they're not going to get that opportunity. So it's the delicate balance of, you want to see the kids grow, or are you just that impatient that they should just go sign somebody just to sign somebody?
Well, this is why I argued about this back in the year when we drafted Connor Bedard. There was a stronger free agent class, and I said, go add someone on a 2 or 3 year deal. Get really aggressive. You have all of this cap space. They went out and they added Paul at that point in time, and that was sort of their big fish, and Corey Perry, and we all know how that worked out. But I think there was more opportunity at the front of the Connor Bedard era to add, other.
But what if you add a guy for 2 to 3 years? He's a free agent going into this offseason, and you don't get any better. It would have been
Correct.
a waste.
Right.
So it's kind of, what's the point? You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that's the thing with this year, though. There's a world where this young defensive group plays really, really well, and Spencer Knight plays really, really well, and the Hawks fuck around and find out and are sniffing a playoff hunt in March. You never know. But we're not going to know unless these kids get an opportunity. Like you said, if Connor Bedard needs to show that 70 points as a 19-year-old is not good enough from the NHL, God for fucking bit, that makes my head explode. This is the year, right? Let him just go out and play. You have nothing to lose. Worst case scenario, you got a shot at Gavin McKenna, and he's another part of your core for the future. With Anton Frondel and Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar and Spencer Knight, they're in an okay situation, but they got to let the kids play. And in fairness, I'll be honest with you, Marner wasn't coming here. Most of the top guys weren't coming here. The rest of the free agency class, because like you said, Tone, guys got re-signed by their own teams, kind of ass. I'd almost rather them not spend money unless there's a guy who's still out there. Steve, you mentioned Jack Roslovic. I think that's a great name as an example. Speed, scores goals, still young, 28 years old. Maybe he takes a 1-year deal at a little bit higher AAV to come to Chicago, gets a little bit more opportunity to play, builds his stock up, leaves in free agency next year, and go gets a big payday. To me, that aligns more.
Or you could trade him at the deadline.
Sure. I think that aligns more with where the
thing.
Hawks are.
That's the thing with me right now, Ron, is I'm looking at this roster. And it's like, what tradable assets do you have at the deadline if you're Kyle Davidson, if things don't go the way that you want them to? And so go ahead, name who you think would fetch back something.
Jason Dickinson's going to be an expiring free agent at 30 years old as a checking center. He's absolutely going to draw some kind of value. Ilya Mikheyev, a speedy winger who's coming off a 20-goal season, who's going to be a pending free agent, also can bring you some kind of value. Sam Lafferty, who brought you value a couple of years ago, is an expiring free agent who's a checking line center who can help a playoff team. And you can make even the argument if Lucas Reichel doesn't work out this year, somebody will probably take a flyer on him, give him another 1-year deal to be in their system and see what happens, because he's only 23 years old. Oh, and Nick
think lost you,
Did we
Ron.
lose Ron there? I
I'm
think
back.
we lost Ron. He's back.
Sorry.
He's back.
Oh,
My
he's
internet's
back.
been stupid lately, but even Nick Foligno, if the captain says he wants to go get one more cup, I don't think he will. Full disclosure. But even him, expiring free agent. There's enough guys on this roster that can bring you back. Connor Murphy can bring you back value this year too. Expiring free agent, 32 years old.
You're talking about a lot of expiring free agents here in this upcoming, well, after this season. So where I'm at with this is your forward group next season, there's going to need to be a lot of work into it. You're going to need to fill
free
some
agency
of
class.
these. And it's a better free agency class. So I think that there's definitely, this is fourth down and long, and Kyle Davidson punted on improving this roster this year. That's where I'm at with it. It was a calculated decision to punt.
Like, yes, so when you say it's a calculated decision to punt, I can see that, because like you guys are saying, where the front office, they're looking at next year's draft class. And I hate that I even have to talk about this, but like, next year's draft class is supposedly, as of now in the summer of 2025, is deep, with Gavin McKenna at number 1 overall already. There's a couple other good players that are in talks, but so from the front office standpoint, like, they're not going to care if they suck again next year. For where I'm seeing it as is, like, just like last year when we got 50 whatever points that we got, if we do that again this year, I'm not going to be pissed if that means that we saw improvement from Connor Bedard or the young players, especially from the blue line, Frank Nazar, or if any of the other young kids that they decide to come up look good. If they take steps in the right direction, and we can see on the ice that things are improving, and let's say we finish the exact same amount of points as last year, I'm not going to be mad. And then especially you throw in like, okay, well, now we can get a draft pick. What I am going to be upset with is looking at this roster right now, which it's not going to get improved through free agency. There really isn't a lot of young players in the forward core. The blue line, yes, and I think that's where the front office has kind of hit things right, is that they're building a strong blue line. They're building a strong defensive core. They're building things up from the back to the front. But on the front, like, we really need to care about Connor Bedard and getting somebody to play with him. So, like, they want Nazar to be the second line center. That's something that the reporters are pushing out. And like I'm just looking at the roster, like Teravainen, sure, like I could see him, like, especially being with Bedard, but Tyler Bertuzzi at 30 years old, I don't think he's going to be a good top 6 player for these kids. And then, like I already said before, Burakovsky, we don't know what he's going to be like for this season. And Ryan Donato, I mean, last year was a career year for him, but is he somebody you really want playing with Connor Bedard? And it's just going to be the same expectations next year, where you have Connor Bedard and everybody's going to be looking at his game to see if there's any improvement. And I think it's going to be even more pressure than there was last year, because if he goes on like another scoreless streak to start the season, things are going to get pretty dark quickly. And I don't know if I could stomach seeing Bedard looking into the dark abyss while on the bench again.
So that's where still a present through some names in the UFA 2026. And I will say this just right off the bat. I did see a report from someone that said Connor McDavid sort of put the Blackhawks on like a short list of potential destinations, or I forget who it was, but I don't know if it was Friedman, but I do know it was out there. One of the bigger hockey names had thrown something out into the world that got me a little bit irrationally excited about that type of thing potentially happening. However, Steve, I agree with you. It's going to be raised expectations for Connor Bedard. You've also got this, like, I don't want to call it a rivalry yet, but it's quickly going to become a San Jose Sharks, Chicago Blackhawks rivalry. And yeah, I know Ron's shaking his head right now, But there
Don't
are a
even get
lot
me
of
fucking started.
there's a lot of social media accounts out there. Like, you have to look at this through the social media lens and say, like, there's so many people who want to compare these two organizations and their rebuilds. And so I think the dangerous thing isn't so much that like Connor Bedard struggles. It's that you see Macklin Celebrini have a supporting cast of high talent, high upside forwards in their group, and they potentially become more successful than the Chicago
Tony,
Blackhawks this season.
Who the fuck is in his forward group that is any better than anybody on the Blackhawks?
Ron, save
I'm
this
gonna have
for
to side
later.
with
What
Tony on this one.
what I'm saying is
Oh,
that there's people on social media that actively believe that forward group is set up better. And if you see the Sharks come out and make highlight reel plays and Connor Bedard is staring into the abyss, there are going to be accounts online that sit there and try and poke the bear of the Chicago Blackhawks fan and say, what the fuck is Kyle Davidson doing? Why aren't they better right now? Oh, he didn't spend money this offseason. And we can sit here on the show and rationalize why it didn't happen. But at the same time, that doesn't change how people are going to feel and how people are going to attack this rebuild, because people hate the Chicago Blackhawks unless you're a Chicago Blackhawks fan. And that is the worst case scenario. That's not to say that San Jose is going to go on and win a cup or that they're a better team than the Blackhawks in 3 to 4 years. However, this is an instant gratification society. So you need to see goals being scored. And I still go back. Ivan Demidov over Artem Levshinov. Like, it's the instant gratification that you want as a hockey fan, and you want highlight reel goals. You want offense. You don't always want to see defense. That doesn't mean that building a strong defensive core isn't a winning strategy.
You know how I can promise you building a strong defensive core is a winning strategy? The Florida Panthers are a beautiful example of that. Aaron Ekblad, Gustav Forsling, Seth Jones this most recently. Josh Mahura was a really good player for them. Brandon Montour went off and got paid because of it. Oh, and then they had a guy named what was that? Sergei Bobrovsky in that? Yeah, I think so. My point being, because we got to reel this the fuck in real quick, because we got a lot of other shit to talk about. We went way too far down a rabbit hole. But
somebody in our X comment said this was going to be a short show.
Yeah, and I quickly responded and said that's not true at all, because it's never a short show here at Forefathers. But I will say this. I think the fears, if you need instant gratification, hockey's not your sport. I'll tell you that right now. It's not. Football's your sport. Basketball's your sport.
Right now?
Right now. It's not. Hockey's not that way. Here's the thing. Nathan McKinnon didn't have a superstar level season until he was 22. And yet he's the poster child for this is how you develop talent. And he was so good. And oh my goodness. And yet we're sitting here, Connor Bedard, 2 years of 60 plus points, had almost 70 fucking points last year with you and me and Steve playing his wings last year, Tony. And people are upset. This is why sometimes I wonder if hockey fans have a fucking clue, because this kid is putting up points. The pucks are going in the net. Shit's just got to compete. Again, everybody has a double standard for this roster right now. Oh, you got to go add talent, but you can't block the kids. Well, guess what? You can't have your cake and fucking eat it too. Pick one. And right now they're prioritizing the kids, and that's how it fucking should be. And that's how it's going to be this year. But pushing forward before anybody
Ron's heated.
Because we'll be here for fucking 2 hours otherwise. We got more shit we got to talk about. There is more news. Tony, you wrote a great article over at OnTapSports.com about this. Arvid Soderblom has filed for arbitration with the Blackhawks. So this is the first player who has done so in 2 years. Last player that did it, Philip Kurashev. And he actually went to arbitration and was awarded a contract by an arbitrator. At the time, $225 for 2 years. in arbitration for hockey, you can only get 1 or 2 year deals. Soderblom is in the camp for that number. And again, keep in mind, both sides can negotiate up until the hearings. Tony, you put it perfectly. Hearings happen somewhere between July 20th and August 4th. What do you guys think about Soderblom going to arbitration? What do you think it means for the future of the goaltending position for the Blackhawks? Because obviously a player like Drew Commesso is kind of waiting in the wings right now in Rockford. And of course, you still have Spencer Knight in the conversation as well. What say you about the Swedish goaltender going to arbitration with the Chicago Blackhawks?
Steve, I'll let you go, and then I'll wrap it up.
All right, I was gonna defer to the goalie expert, so
I'll take it.
quick.
I'll take it if you
Defer
want.
to the goalie guy.
You want me? I'll take it. So I think it's kind of an interesting move for Soderblom to elect arbitration here. And my first initial thought was, didn't the Blackhawks front office just bring in like a contract negotiation expert? And it sort of signals to me that Arvid Soderblom may have been, I don't want to throw this out there in a way that it makes people think that like I have any sort of information on this, but it makes me wonder how Arvid Soderblom's camp is trying to protect himself in this goaltending depth chart, right? Because you did make an acquisition of Spencer Knight. Soderblom was sort of ass a season prior. And I think that there's a lot of Blackhawks fans, just my pulse check on this, who are just done with Arvid Soderblom after the 23-24 season. And I thought, for all intents and purposes, last year, there were stretches of time where Arvid Soderblom was arguably the number one goalie for the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, that does not mean that he was playing at a acceptable level that's going to get you into playoff contention. But we all know that goalies are slow to develop. I saw it, at least from what I watched last season, a step forward from Arvid Soderblom. And so you have to wonder if him taking that step forward and then the Blackhawks going out there and acquiring someone who is just flat out better, sort of forced the Soderblom camp into an arbitration hearing just based on the stats, because I don't think the Blackhawks were going to come out and give him what he would have gotten had you not had Spencer Knight walk into the Chicago Blackhawks locker room. The priority is probably Spencer Knight. That's just, I think that's probably an easy thing to, a conclusion to come to, is that they're going to prioritize Spencer Knight. Ron, you also said that you've got Drew Commesso waiting in the wings. So I think Soderblom's going to try and get as much money as he can, and they've evaluated at this point in time that going to arbitration is the way to get the most money out of this. So I think there's a little bit of hardball being played here, but at the same point in time, I don't think it's the end of the world. If this goes horribly, you'll probably see these two camps leave each other at some point this season. I can see an Arvid Soderblom trade if he plays well enough and doesn't want to be here in Chicago. Maybe that's just a little foreshadowing. But at the same point in time, I do think he played well enough to earn himself the backup role in Chicago next season. And then you still have, as mentioned earlier on the show, the myth, the legend that is Laurent Brossoit, and whether or not he comes into the fold here. So I think Arvid's camp is probably trying to do everything that they possibly can to secure themselves the largest dollar amount that they can get, to make it somewhat of an incentive for the Chicago Blackhawks to pay and use Arvid Soderblom this season, just for his NHL career going forward. That's sort of how I read these negotiations, but it's going to be interesting to see what dollar amount they come to for Arvid Soderblom, because, the stats were better, but they're still not all there. So I haven't gone down and looked at backup goalie arbitration numbers, but Ron, you've got the PhD in salary cap geography here. What are you thinking he gets dollar amount wise? I was thinking it might come out around $3 million potentially for a year or two.
I don't know. If
Maybe 2.5.
3. Yeah, I don't know if it'll be 3. My guess is probably somewhere around like 2.85 for like a year. It's either going to be 2.85 for a year. Or it's going to be a little lower, like 2.65 for 2. It's going to be somewhere.
That's what I was going to say. It's going to be over 2.5 because you have to remember he carried Peter Mrazek for stretches during that season, and I think he probably overall in the whole entire season had the most starts in goal for the Blackhawks. I'd have to go back and check that. But
Tony, do you think the Hawks can get Lucas Dossel?
I'm not going down that path right now. No, no,
they cannot. He will be a Duck.
Yeah, I was just looking him up. I don't think that's going to happen.
Steve, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think, Tony, I share your feelings on the negotiations and how those are going. For the Blackhawks goaltender depth, though, it is kind of getting a little interesting for Soderblom in his camp because Drew Commesso, he's entering his third year of his contract. And just kind of reading from Ben Pope of the Chicago Sun-Times, and what he was saying was the Blackhawks are hoping that Commesso takes a step forward in Rockford this year. So that kind of puts some pressures on both parties for Soderblom and the Blackhawks, because now you got Commesso, where if he does look good, what do we do with Soderblom? Because like if Soderblom kind of looks really good as a backup goaltender, he's a pretty awesome trade piece that I would be willing to move, like not even just at the trade deadline, but if we extend him for 2 years, you can trade him in the offseason. Like people are always needing goaltenders, especially where the league is at right now, where it's not like you have this one solid goaltender. Like it's usually like the 1A and 1B situation. So Soderblom, like he's only 25 years old. And like you were saying, Tony, these goaltenders take a long time to develop. And we look at Seattle with Joey Decord. He didn't become a starting goaltender until I think he was like 28 or 29. So if there's a GM that's looking at Soderblom, like, hey, this kid's he's actually got some room for potential, like be happy to take him on. And for the Blackhawks, like I would be hoping to get a pretty nice return for him. So that's kind of where I see that working out. I don't see us getting Dostal just because one, that's the Ducks guy. And two, if we are like, we already got Soderblom and Drew Commesso. If he ends up working out,
you have Guyon behind that too.
And we still have Guyon,
and let's not forget Spencer Knight's a Blackhawk.
And Spencer Knight. So
and we got to lock that up long term, though. We got to lock that up.
Yeah, and people haven't been too happy with Guyon in his first year at college hockey, but like kids still got a ways to go too. We just don't know with these guys. So I don't know. I think we're in a decent situation with the goaltending. It's just kind of seeing where we go. What do you guys think he gets though? Do you think he's getting a 2-year deal or just a 1 year?
I think in ARB, he probably gets 1. That's right. I think, unless you come to an agreement outside of ARB, but I can't see Kyle Davidson forking over a long-term contract to Arvid Soderblom at this very moment. I just don't. I don't think it works for the Blackhawks, and I think that's probably why you're in arbitration at this point. Is because I would guess that Soderblom wants something 2 years plus for some security here, and that's not going to fit on the Hawks roster at this point with the body of work. You had an upward trajectory season. I think the Hawks want 1 year, and if he gets 2, I think that's sort of not where the Hawks want to be tied to contractually. That's just my reading on it. Ron could probably explain it better than I can when it comes to.
I mean, if the arbitrator rules on it, I think it's going to be a 2-year deal, just because of what we saw with Philip Kershev. It was kind of the same way. Hawks wanted to give him more AAV for 1 year. He wanted 2 for a little less because of the security. The arbitrator went with the Kurashevs too. So if I had a guess, if it really gets to that point, Soderblom's probably getting like 265 per year for 2 years if the arbitrator rules it. If it's the Hawks, they may say, hey, we'll just give you 3 for 1 year because we can afford it. And if we, again, if they move him, they move him. Still, it asks, if Soderblom gets a deal, do they trade Bressois? I think it could be the opposite. I think they could trade Soderblom halfway through the year. Bressois backs up Knight to conclude the year when his contract expires. And then effectively you think about rolling into the following season with a duo of Camesso and Knight as your young goaltenders in net. But we'll see.
And let's also not pretend the fact that like somebody can get hurt next year.
100%.
Like goalie injuries happen. We've seen this countless times. So while you're set up good from a depth perspective, let's not rule out the part where you could see Drew Camesso at the NHL level next year in place of a Spencer Knight injury or a Arvid Soderblom injury, or hey, if Laurent Bressois is still unable to go, maybe he's IR'd, and you're going to need that depth too at this point in time. So I think this is probably something that gets sort of shaken out near the trade deadline next year, as Ron said, in terms of like where the long-term goaltender depth looks, or what the goaltender depth looks like, and what the future holds. I just don't think that we've got this clear picture yet because there's so many moving parts at the moment.
So many moving parts. And the biggest moving part is still got to see what happens before the arbitration hearing for Soderblom. So Hawks could come to a deal with Soderblom. They could not. They might go to an arbitrator. We'll have to wait and see. But again, that will be somewhere in the range of July 20th to August 4th if it goes to arbitration. If they come to an agreement, we'll probably hear something a little bit sooner. Gentlemen, when you guys last were on this show, you guys talked about some free agent rumblings from Benton Pope. Names that were mentioned: Nicola Ehlers, Besser, Granlund. Hawks would check in, probably not meet their demands. 100% true. Ehlers went to Carolina. Besser went surprisingly back to Vancouver. And Granlund went to Southern California to join the Anaheim Ducks. A couple of surprises, I think, of that group. Other names that were mentioned: Jonathan Drouin, Jack Roslovic, Victor Olofsson, and Andrei Kuzmenko. Kuzmenko and Drouin signing elsewhere already. Roslovic had a really good season last year. Could be a player the Blackhawks could still be in on here even 7 days into free agency, as is Olofsson, but we'll have to wait and see there. And then, of course, Hawks could seek out a tough depth forward. Tanner Jeannot, Nick Cousins, Isamont, really not available. Kunin is still out there. And then defensively speaking, Petrie gone, but Merrill and the cousin of Alex Vlasic, Mark Edward, available still. Would love to see Mark Edward be the 7th defenseman for the Hawks team, just for the sake of having two Vlasics on the roster. But that
more pickles are better than just some pickles.
Yeah, the more pickles you can get on the roster, the better. But gentlemen, with that in mind, I kind of want to get to our next topic because we have at least 3 more things before we get to our habitual segments here that I want to touch on. The first one just being your free agency thoughts, just quick reflection. Could be league-wide, could be Hawks-wide. We talked obviously a lot about the Hawks and maybe a little bit disappointment of not adding. Kind of what's the pulse check now since you guys were live literally a week ago before free agency?
Like kind of me and Tony were talking about from the Hawks front. I mean, wasn't surprising, and I think we just saw a lot of upset fans vocalizing their frustrations, which I totally get. But from the league standpoint, I think as far as surprises go, I was really shocked that Florida was still somehow able to hold on to Ekblad, Marchand, and Sam Bennett.
Yes.
And Bennett getting, what did he get, like 10 mil or something?
8 by 8. 8 by 8.
8 by 8. So that's still like, it's a lot of money for him. I think he's maybe getting a little bit overpaid than if he would have gone to another team. So it's impressive that they were able to lock him in Marchand with his, I think his 6-year contract, and he's like 37 years old. It's crazy. And then Ekblad, they were able to squeeze him in still. So that was interesting to see from Florida. But other than that, it's just kind of quiet. Like Besser, like that was surprising that he stayed in Vancouver, and then Euler is like, I think Carolina's a good fit for him. He'll go on the right wing. I still think they need to solve their second line center, but I think Euler's, if we were going to, I don't want to say hit or swing big or anything, he would have been somebody I would have been okay with getting, just as long as we didn't get a lot of term, which that's what he wants is term. So just like with everything, like it just nothing really matched up with what the Blackhawks were looking for and all the good players. So we're really left with like Roslovic and your Olofssons, where they're probably going to get like a 1-year deal. And like, I don't know, but on that, like if we do sign them, I'm going to be honest, like at this point, like I kind of will be a little upset just because we got Lafferty, we got Burakovsky. I think right now I'm sitting fine on veteran forwards just because I don't want them to block any of the prospects. And I think like if Nick Lardis somehow looks good after training camp and we got too many old dudes on the roster, like that's going to cause some issues. And we'll get to Frundell in a little bit, but it's just, I don't know. I don't want another 30-year-old veteran in the forward core.
Totally fair. Tony, anything to add to that?
I don't have much. The first thing I'll say, impressive what Florida did. I echo Steve. The fall of that team is going to be spectacular to watch, though. When that like hits the fan,
it's going to be a few years, though.
It's going to be a few years. Like I think they have another cup in them, maybe 2. They're dangerous. And see, this is where you have to look at it and maybe put this into perspective from a Blackhawks standpoint. They're nowhere near the level of talent that the Florida Panthers have amassed. And you have to find guys that are going to be that level of star player in order to get up to that level. And I think that they've really decided, and I hate this, I sound like a fucking Kyle Davidson stan on this show right now. And I'm mad because I want this team to win. But like, that's why I don't think that they're really trying to push chips in. If you have the ability to get, Connor Bedard's cousin onto this roster. So I think that there's going to be a lot of fans who are disappointed with this. I put myself in that camp too. I'm disappointed with where we're at right now. But from an overall free agency standpoint, I look at what Florida's done, and it's like you want to replicate something like that. It reminds me a little bit of a group of players who were in Chicago at one point and partying out at bars after cup wins, and legendary tales that take place from all of that. So, kudos to them for being able to do it. And, you got to sort of take a pulse check as a Blackhawks fan and look at it and say, like, how far are you from that? And does Olofsson get you any closer to that at this very moment? And I think my answer to that is probably no. It's sort of sobering to think about, but I really believe that this NHL free agency period is probably one of the most boring I've ever seen take place. In all of my years of being a fan of hockey. There really hasn't been much movement, but across leagues, we've seen this happen before in the NFL. You've seen it happen before in MLB. I'm not much of an NBA guy, so I can't really comment on that, but there's some off seasons that are just sort of, you're doing your business and you stay on track as best as you can as an organization. And I think, the Hawks sort of read that probably a little bit earlier than a lot of fans did, given the amount of, intel that they probably have comparative to us normal citizens. It was a boring free agency period. There's not much to write home about, but hopefully next year is more exciting from an overall standpoint. Ronald.
I agree. Just quickly, because we have a lot of other things to talk about here. What if I told you guys that what Florida did was truly the epitome of taking a hometown discount? Because Bennett was probably going to get 10 million a year plus on the market, and Marchand was too, according to everything that's out there from very reliable sources, aka guys like Elliot Friedman and others. The fact that those two stayed for the money they did, Ekblad took less money than his last contract to stay in Florida. That's the epitome of that group knows they're good enough to keep winning, and they want to keep winning, and they made it work. And that was pretty spectacular. Quiet on the Hawks front. I don't think we're super surprised by that, but I think it makes for maybe an interesting 2026. We'll have to wait and see on the front of free agency. Two quick questions here. The first one, a bit of a debate. We were at the 56-minute mark, folks. Buckle in because it's going to be fun. We still got a lot to talk about. There's a lot of controversy and questioning about what will happen with Anton Frondell. So obviously Frondell was the top pick for the Blackhawks in this recent draft. The reports are that Scott Powers, according to him, believes that Frondell might stick with the team for a few games out of camp. If that is the case, does he go back to Sweden? Does he stay in the NHL? Should he just go straight back to Sweden because his team's being elevated to the top Swedish league this year? They'll be playing in the SHL, which is great competition. It's the best league in Sweden. What say you two about Anton Frondell and where he should be this coming season? Should he go back to Sweden or should he be in Chicago full time in 2025, 2026?
As somebody who's said multiple times that I don't think the AHL is a actual developmental league, and somebody who's been a bit more maybe okay with Nazar and Levshinov, maybe not Levshinov, but Nazar skipping, going to Rockford altogether, I think Frondell does not need to go to the NHL next year. And that's because of the difference in European ice with what they play with in North America. And with Frondell, his weakness is on the transition, and he kind of uses the space. And this is what I've been listening to some stuff from the prospect on, is that he kind of uses that space to his advantage. So I don't want to throw him to the wolves in the NHL just yet. I would be okay with him going to Rockford, but as he said after the draft, he wants to go play with the Blackhawks or he wants to go back to Sweden. So I don't think that if he comes to the Blackhawks and we send him down to Rockford after training, like a poor training camp, I don't think we're going to have a happy player. So we do need to kind of respect the player's wishes. And if he wants to play with Sweden, like, to be honest, I kind of hope he does. I would be patient on that one. And like, I just don't want to see this kid get rushed to the NHL and it's just not looking good for him.
I agree with Steve, and I think you and I talked a little bit about this on the last show as well, too. I want to see Frondell sort of on the Artem Levshinov plan. Started out in Rockford. Maybe make your way to the NHL if you earn it. I think there's enough depth within the forward group. Unless you have an impressive training camp, fitting Frondell in there is going to be tough on the Blackhawks forward group right now. And I think Steve laid out a bunch of excellent points. You don't want to cause frustration for a young kid right out of the gate. It can only compound some issues. Let him get used to American ice. Let our coaches within our system who are closer to the NHL team get their hands on him and work with him and sort of shape the way that he needs to play. That said, I don't think it's the end of the world if he winds up back over in Sweden. However, I think it just probably delays things longer than the Blackhawks are going to want it to delay things, because you're still going to have to make that jump at some point that Steve talked about from a on ice perspective and getting adapted to American Canadian ice. So there's a lot of reasons why you want him here, although you still have to remember back to some of the statements that were made on draft night or the day after in these press conferences, where Frondell sort of openly said, if I don't make the Blackhawks roster, I'm going back to Sweden. And so I think that sort of forces the Blackhawks camp hand a little bit and let some discussions take place on like, here's what our development schedule is for you. Is this acceptable? If he says no and wants to go back to Sweden, I don't think you want to play with fire and say like, hey, we're signing you over to Rockford and we're going to try and push this. So that's where I think that, from a front office perspective, you want to put the player in a position that's most comfortable for him, but you also want to see them take leaps forward. I think this is a tough one. And as I said before, it's really going to depend on how he looks in training camp and in probably the Tom Curvers. And we're all going to get a look at that. And I'm sure we're all going to be feasting over it the same way we were with Connor Bedard a couple of years ago and trying to look at, is he going to come out and score goals? Is he going to be impactful on the ice? You'll probably see him in a couple of preseason games. So there's going to be times for us to get looks at him as well as the Blackhawks. And I don't think that decision's really easy to make on what should happen until we see how it translates in front of our eyes in actual games that we're watching. So I would say early prediction is that, you might get a couple of games in the NHL to start the season. And that would be based on merit. And if it continues to look well, you might see Anton Frondell in the NHL this year. I'd be a fan of it, but he's got to earn that. And if it doesn't look good, you got to pull the plug on that quickly and make it right for the player and, not overwhelm him. But I think this goes back to how dangerous this pick was for Kyle Davidson and the Blackhawks.
Yeah, I think either way, you had to make a pick, right? There wasn't anything of value to trade out of it. So it is what it is. I think Frondell was the right pick. I think he was a good pick. I have everything I said on the show immediately following the first round, I still stick with here. Still, it asks, is a Frondell, Bedard, Donato on the top line a thing? Or Skoke says he thinks Frondell gets a few games at the start. I think he does get a few games at the start, but here's what I will 100% say. The idea of some lunchtime hockey over the course of the whole year in Sweden sounds fucking awesome because Lebowski says it right here. Frondell should absolutely go to the SHL. I completely agree. The SHL is one of the best leagues in the world, arguably better than the AHL. Yes, is it not North American ice? Sure. Is he going to grow there, though? Absolutely. He's going to play against grown-ass men. He's going to play against 30-something-year-olds in the SHL. Unless he earns it, as you said, Tony, and I think that's the absolute right vision and approach to this. If he earns the right to be in the NHL, let him be. If he doesn't, let him go back to Sweden. I'll watch lunchtime hockey in Sweden. I might even pick up a few words of Swedish when it's all said and done this year. Be cool and tough shit here at Four Feathers Podcast. But at the end of the day, I really do believe, as beneficial as it might be, to let him get acclimated to North American ice.
Swedish meatball takes going on right now from Ron Lewis.
I enjoy some Swedish meatballs, by the way. I think the right move, though, is to let him go back to Sweden, compete against grown-ass men, come back into camp next year with that mentality. Again, if he doesn't earn the right to be here now, because there's going to be tons of forward spots open. We just went through it a little while ago. The amount of expiring forward contracts going into next season. There's a shit ton of them that are going to be there for the taking. Anton Frondell can absolutely take that as a 19-year-old. So I think that's the best move for him moving forward when it's all said and done. Gentlemen, I have one more thing for you guys before we ruffle some feathers and dish out some stick taps. According to insiders, and like reliable insiders, this is the Frank Spaghetti and Meatballs, Cervelli's, Elliot Friedman's, Darren Dragers, et cetera of the world. They think that the offseason's not quite done. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of belief that now that the free agency period has settled and that restricted free agents are being signed or traded, as we saw with Keandre Miller going from New York to Carolina, some crazy shit might happen in the next like 10 to 15 days of some player movement, teams addressing needs. Now that free agency's dust has kind of settled, I ask you guys what level of not even so much league wide, because I do believe generally there will be league wide movement that surprises some people here. Do you guys believe the Blackhawks will be involved at all in said league wide movement? Because I do think there's a world where the Blackhawks could make a trade, say with a player like Lucas Reichel, and maybe bring in somebody back the other way, maybe some draft capital, maybe it's an expiring contract for 1 year, but it opens up possibilities with a prospect or something like that. And again, prospects are prospects until they're no longer prospects, as we like to say over at Cubs on Tap. That applies here to hockey as well.
I thought prospects were suspects.
No, prospects are prospects until they're no longer prospects. You're tainted by the world of White Sox baseball. I can't help you with that, Tony. I'm sorry. But I ask you guys, where do we believe Blackhawks could be involved in that? And again, don't overthink it. Shoot from the hip. What do we think here before we ruffle some feathers and dish out some stick taps?
Kevin Korchinski and Lucas Reichel trade package deal.
Ooh.
I agree. I think those two players are the ones that have value to their names. They're young, especially Korchinski. I know a lot of fans aren't too excited about his play from his brief stint at the NHL last year. But he's a young defenseman that has a lot of value. He shows a ton of talent. He's a great skater. He's fast. He's like really good with offensive reads. He just needs to work out his defensive game, and I think that still has a lot of value for our organization. I would like to see Korchinski stay, but I think Korchinski could be included in a trade package. And then Lebowski, he's asking trade him for what? So that's kind of my question is I think if we're going to be trading for somebody, it needs to be somebody that can play with Bedard. I don't know who the hell that could be, because if I'm like I've talked about at the beginning of the show, like we have a hole on the wing, and that needs to get addressed. Jason Robertson.
I want to throw a name out. I want to throw a name out here, Steve, before you keep going further down this. If you can't get the deal done for Kevin Korchinski and it's not going to bring you back a top 6 forward, you entertain Ethan Del Mastro, you entertain Wyatt Kaiser, you entertain any one of those young B names that's on that list. And if you want to try and make that move, the sexy move, it doesn't matter. You start with Kevin Korchinski because he's obviously fallen out of some favor with the Chicago Blackhawks, but still has a ton of upside. But you can look down that. My only untouchables right now are Artem Levshinov and Sam Rinzel in that blue line.
I would maybe throw in Vlasic as well. I really like what
I think that I didn't even consider Vlasic because I think he's your staple. But yes, you're correct.
Right.
You're correct.
I have.
I don't think they're moving Vlasic in any way, shape, or form. I've seen his name thrown into potential next captain conversation. So he wasn't even in my mind as like young defender. I think he's kind of a veteran at this point in time, even though he's still pretty young.
He's young. I would say he does bring that veteran knowledge to the blue line, even though he still has a lot of work to do as well. But I have seen people throw his name in potential trade talks. Not anybody serious, like people on Twitter talking and bullshitting. So I do think that, like, if you're going to look at Vlasic, I mean, he does have value. Is he somebody you're worth wanting to part with? Me? No. I think our blue line is solid as it is right now with the prospects. We still need to see where Rinzel turns into, but still. So I agree with you guys. I think it's Reichel and Korchinski are the two kind of pieces that we can move. We just need to find somebody who can score goals.
As Kyle Davidson says, it takes two to tango. So I think Lucas Reichel's value is sort of high risk, potentially medium reward at this point in time. I don't think he's, he could be a change of scenery candidate,
Yeah.
But it's not like you're not going to get something straight up. It's not going to be Lucas Reichel for somebody who's going to come in and play with Bedard. So you have to give something of value in order to get something back. That's just how this works. And I'm sure if the Blackhawks do get involved in something like this to try and make things maybe a little better, fans might be a little pissed off at what you have to give up in order to acquire talent. We haven't really seen that deal from Kyle Davidson. That's why I feel that he hasn't really crossed that path in GM land to like go and leverage that. And some people might say, you know, the Seth Jones for Spencer Knight deal was, you know, going out and using a guy to acquire something. But Seth Jones helped the franchise go on to win a Stanley Cup. Spencer Knight's a developing goaltender. So you still haven't seen Kyle Davidson sort of just move young assets to acquire the like fully developed player. And I think it helps Ron, and you can probably agree with me or correct me if I'm wrong, but you're going to have to get this guy, whoever he is, sort of on the end of his deal, and sort of help probably replenish someone else. I don't know if that comes over this offseason, but I think you can potentially say that even if it's not this offseason, when you get near the trade deadline this year, I wouldn't be surprised if the Hawks try and take on an asset that might have a year or two left and might be looking for a change of scenery themselves. So I definitely think that there's going to be some activity for the Blackhawks, and I think Kyle Davidson's going to be continuing to work the phones. I think there was some foreshadowing in his press conference as well when he said, you know, we're going to continue to look for ways to improve the roster, but we were done for today, which he lied there. He went out and made a signing like an hour later of an AHL guy, but I digress.
Digressing indeed. There's also a lot of hope for Sam Renzel going into the future here. An ideal offer sheeting a player like Mason McTavish. Again, there's a lot of players out there in the RFA market that could be intriguing if Kyle Davidson so chooses to get aggressive. Hasn't traded high picks for quality talent either. I think a lot of that still was them trying to replenish the pipeline that his predecessor, Mr. Stan Bowman, very adequately depleted over.
Well, Ron, I also want to comment on that comment as well too from Stolet. We talked about this when what was that trade that we were all pissed off about like a week ago? Was it involving Buffalo right around the draft?
For JJ Peterka.
Yeah, the JJ Peterka. So if the Hawks had offered number 3 there, I think that there were a lot of people who weren't, a lot of GMs who weren't really valuing this draft class for what they were getting. So I don't think it's so much. Wow, I feel like I'm a Kyle Davidson apologist today. I just don't think that there were other GMs out there that were willing to make these moves. I don't know what's gotten into
I need to Tony,
drink a couple more beers and get mad on the Hawks.
Tony, you mean that you're being logical and sane in the fact that you can't just whip shit up like it's an NHL video game? That's crazy. Bonkers.
It is crazy bonkers because that's not my style. I want the craziness. I want to be able to force the trade.
You want to be able to play a video game. We all do, but that's not the nature of the beast. So neither here nor there. Speaking of ruffling feathers, let's ruffle some more feathers. Tony, you're the only person that didn't write shit down, so I'm going to ask you: do you care to ruffle some feathers, or do you turn it over to Steve?
I'm still deciding on if I want to ruffle feathers tonight. I feel like my last few segments have already really ruffled a lot of feathers, but I'll give it to Steve for right now. Let me do some thinking here.
Steve, the floor is yours.
I think people need to stop telling upset fans to just not be patient. I'm kind of been leaning on the side of what Kyle Davidson has been doing, but I also 100% get where the frustration from fans are coming from. I don't think it generates good discourse online when I see somebody just tell somebody who's questioning the rebuild, just be patient. It doesn't teach anybody anything, because there is something to learn where it's like there's more than one way to build a winning team. And what we're doing right now is the long, slow process of rebuilding through the draft. And the fans that are upset, they want to see something like what Florida did. So when somebody's upset, don't tell them just be patient. Like, explain why. Unless they're just being a dickhead, then just you could say whatever. But that's kind of my ruffle some feathers.
You mean Florida didn't patiently rebuild with players like Aaron Ekblad and Alexander Barkov?
So
Weird.
I don't want to get into a huge rabbit hole, but and yes, they did draft Huberdeau and they did trade him for a really good player. But with Bill Zito and what Kyle Davidson's currently doing, I mean, like, if we're looking at Florida, then we're probably saying that Kyle Davidson isn't going to be the GM when the Hawks are trying to win again.
And if we're looking at Florida, we're also saying the Hawks aren't going to win for another 7 years.
Yeah,
because Aaron Ekblad was drafted in 2012 and Alexander Barkov was 2013.
Can we just add in the fact that everybody thought that everybody thinks that Connor Bedard's going to walk away from this, even though he said multiple times that he's in this for the long haul. And I want to know where, like, I want to go back and dig up tweets and see like who thought that they were going to leave too, because it was just such a shit show there. History normally repeats itself. So I'm sure there's some takes out there that those guys were on their way out.
There certainly are. But I agree, Steve. I support letting the hate flow. It's all kind of fun. Speaking of letting hate flow, there's very few times in this world that my brain gets like totally befuddled on hockey Twitter, where like I hear something and it's so preposterous that I can't mentally comprehend it. That happened like within the last 48 hours. Johnny Lazarus, I believe is his name. I don't listen to tons of people. Forgive me for sounding ignorant. I'm not trying to be ignorant, but he said, and he quickly pedaled back on these statements, but have no fear, my friend. The video's on the internet. You are not running from this one. Said that the San Jose Sharks would finish, and I promise you, I cleared this number twice, did the math. Makes no sense. 20 points better than the Blackhawks next year in the standings. And I have never heard something so ludicrous in my entire life. The last time I heard something so ludicrous, it was titled "Move Bitch, Get Out the Way." Because that was the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard on the internet in my entire life. Steve and I sat here, Tony, well before you jumped into the StreamYard this evening for us to record this episode, and dove through the Sharks roster. The infatuation with the San Jose Sharks is befuddling to me. Yes, Macklin Celebrini's a really good player. Will Smith's a really good player. William Eklund's a really good player. The rest of that roster is not anything special. In fact, it's worse than the Hawks. They have no goaltender outside of Alex Nedeljkovic, who they just robbed from the Pittsburgh Penguins for a bag of beans because Kyle Dubas doesn't know what he's doing in Western Pennsylvania. Their defense is littered with the ghosts of John Klingberg, Dmitry Orlov, and others. And outside of the forwards that I mentioned, Philip Kurashev, fucking Adam Gaudet, Blackhawks legend for you that forget, and the ghosts of players like Tyler Toffoli and others are what's supporting that forward group. If you really think they're going to be that much better than the fucking Blackhawks next year, you are sadly mistaken. I don't understand the infatuation with the Sharks, at least not right now. I think if they have a couple more good drafts and they continue to develop some talent, maybe. But this is a team that just started kind of recouping the cupboard in the last few years and had a lot worse contracts to get out from than the Hawks did. Like Mark Edward Vlasic. Remember that guy who played against like Duncan Keith and like defended in front of Evgeny Nabokov back in 2010. Yeah, he just got bought out in his last year of his deal because that's where the fucking San Jose Sharks were. So please, for the love of God, if you're going to get my mentions and mention anything nice about the San Jose Sharks, other than the fact that their colors are kind of decent and they had some really good players play for them back in those years when the Hawks were kicking their ass, just stop yourself because I will rip you a new asshole. That team sucks. They will not even sniff the Blackhawks. 20 points? Are you fucking kidding me? Saying the Sharks are going to be 20 points better than the Blackhawks is saying that I'm going to be less than 200 pounds by my wedding day in 4 months. It ain't going to fucking happen, brother. Terrible take. Awful. It ruffled my own feathers to the point where I need to ruffle somebody else's feathers. Johnny Lazarus, I'm glad you realized how stupid your fucking take was and admitted it on the internet because I felt dumber listening to that take. That's how bad it was. So I digress. But the infatuation with the San Jose Sharks right now and just the two-hand stroke job of a roster that sucks ass, as pointed out by Lebowski here, because they need young defensemen badly. Like Sam Dickinson's your only defenseman worth of shit. He's 19, and he's not even going to sniff the NHL for at least another year. Trash. Garbage. Horrendous. Just like that part of California outside of Sonoma. It's all garbage. Let them rot in the bay. And don't even bring them up in the same sentence as the Blackhawks, or I'm going to fucking lose my goddamn collective mind.
I hope
Tony.
this ages well. I hope this ages well for you, man. That was a top 10 ruffle some feathers. Ron's rants.
That's bad, man.
I need to take a break. I think you're in for a long decade of people comparing these two franchises together.
Good. And I can't wait until every person that thinks the Sharks are going to be better is a fucking moron. Genuinely.
You're giving me some hope here.
Good.
You're giving me some hope.
I've given myself some hope. Tony, are you going to ruffle feathers or should we move on to stick taps?
No, I got one. I'm gonna throw up a comment from Stole It Breezing, and I'm gonna preface this with something here. Stole It earlier said he got an email from a Blackhawks ticket rep trying to get him to grab a package, just not moved with the roster. Centennial season is not enough for me. I've heard a lot of people that I frequently talk to who have been getting emails from the Chicago Blackhawks about season ticket packages for this upcoming season. And I totally understand why some people don't want to invest money into attending Chicago Blackhawks games next year, based on the roster, based on all this stuff. However, I've been a partial season ticket holder for what now, Ron? We've been there the last 2 years.
2 years, this will be year 3.
It's been great. For as much as this team is probably still within the rebuilding phase, I don't think that they tried to schedule the Centennial season on a year where they're not going to be competing. It happened that way.
Because 100 years only happens when it's been 100 years.
Correct. 100 years has only happened when it's been 100 years. I think that's important to point out, and I'm really glad that Ron threw that fact in there. However, I think it goes a little bit deeper than just the roster for a lot of people. I think that there's a lot of fan sentiment, and you see it right now. Patrick Kane made a media tour today. He was on ESPN radio. You saw it. Some posts over from the Barstool crew that he's going to be on, I believe, on a show that'll be released on Friday. Barstool chief said that, he's mad at the front office. I think the Jamie Faulkner sort of marketing scheme with the Blackhawks has really turned off a lot of people. And I don't know if that's the part that's ruffling feathers of everyone. However, I will say this as a Blackhawks fan, for someone who's not exactly all in on the Jamie Faulkner marketing plan, I'm still going to attend a healthy amount of Chicago Blackhawks games next season. And I'm going to enjoy the centennial season, because I think as a fan, it's really fucking cool to be able to experience that. Whether they hit all of the marketing points that you want to see or whether you hate it, I think it's still a really cool milestone for a franchise. And so for everybody out there who wants to just like toss it under the bus that Jamie Faulkner is the reason why you're not going to attend something or you're mad at this team, she's an employee of a team that has 100-year history at this point in time, and she's not going to be the last marketing person driving the ship. There's still a rich history for the Chicago Blackhawks, and one that I'm proud to be a fan of. And I have had great times in my life, especially watching Cups back in the Chris Chelios era. You know, just as a fan, like, it's cool to celebrate this milestone. And I think that we've had way too many people just tossing a really cool milestone under the rug because they're not happy with the current front office. They're not happy with the fact that the team's not going to be a playoff contender this year, or they're not happy that Connor Bedard doesn't have someone on his wing. Throw that aside for a second and think about everybody else who was part of this franchise for 100 years. It's still a really fucking cool and tough milestone to make, and it should be celebrated, and you should think about that before you just go badmouth the entire organization and swear them off. That might ruffle some feathers there.
I'll double down to ruffle some feathers. If you look at the history of the Blackhawks and the achievements they actually have, it's almost pathetic that that's all they have in 100 years, but that's neither here nor there, especially when you played with 6 teams for 40-something odd years until an expansion. But neither here nor there. I'm not going to open up that can of worms tonight. We don't have time for that. Tony, I'll let you keep the floor. On a more positive note, stick taps that you would like to hand out.
Stick taps. There was an announcement today that Blackhawks legend, a very prominent Blackhawks legend, announced his retirement, and that's Tyler Johnson. I'm trying to find the video so that we can play it for everybody. I had it up here at one point, but I don't right now. So I'm sort of working our way towards that video. But Tyler Johnson announced his retirement. He's an absolute Blackhawks legend, and I'm sorry for Ben. I just have to say sorry for Ben. So stick taps to Tyler Johnson on a great career. Sorry, Ben. There's a legendary video out there. I don't have it up. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know what happened to it. So I found it. I found it. We've got it.
Okay.
We've got it. We've got it for the people. And I will present here in just a moment. Steve didn't know about this until prior to the show. Steve, can you tell, before we get into this, were you as shocked as I was the first time I saw this?
I thought it was hilarious. That was awesome. I think your stick taps are well deserved.
Perfect. All right, let's see what we can do here. We're going to share this video out.
Somebody's going to hate us for stick tapping a video about cheating on your boyfriend. But anyway,
not having find out.
You know, this is a television camera.
Yeah, it's an old boyfriend.
But he's finding out right now.
No, it's an old boyfriend, not the one I'm with now.
So, but the boyfriend is finding out on television right now.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Sorry, Ben.
Why'd you cheat on him?
I don't know. The guy was a famous athlete.
Which famous athlete?
I can't say his name.
Give us his initials.
TJ.
What sport does he play?
Hockey.
What team does he play for?
Florida. Tampa Bay.
Okay, so he plays for Tampa Bay. His initials are T and J. Tyler Johnson?
Okay, I have to go.
Sorry, Ben.
So that's my stick tap. Tyler Johnson, great career. Blackhawks legend. That video just kept hitting the internet today, so had to.
It did.
Sorry, Ben.
Sorry, Ben. Yeah, it hit the internet hard today, but it was a great career from Tyler Johnson, a couple of Stanley Cups, a guy that was undrafted who probably should have never truly had NHL success by the odds, and had a really successful NHL career, stuck around for a long time, 3 different organizations. Um, a hell of a retirement, and wishes to him. Steve, stick taps.
I do, and they're going off to you, Ron. You've been putting together some awesome player grades, going through the entire roster. Me and Tony added some comments, but you've been handling all the weight for that. So stick taps, those are some fun reads. We've been sharing them on the IG, the Instagram. So check those out. Check them out on the website. It's some good stuff.
We're going to have a lot more of them too. I will apologize for the break. We did that on purpose with the draft and with free agency. Let those breathe for a little bit, but we've got them lined up all the way through the end of July at this point. That's if everyone gets out daily. The next one out is Spencer Knight. That'll be going out tomorrow. It's a good one. The grades in themselves are fun and a little controversial throughout the course of the thing. I will admit, full disclosure, and thank you, Steve. I've done these for the last. I believe last year was the first year we fully started these, and they've been a lot of fun. I think they're cool. It's a good off-season thing. Keeps people invested. Keeps people thinking about the season prior, the season upcoming. But I think my favorite part of the player grades is being the last person to fill out their player grades, like I was for a large number, because I can see what you guys said with my already commentary that I had in mind. There was a few there on a as Tony would probably put it, a late night with some brews, where I was doing some player grades. I got a little sassy in my replies, and there was 100% times I was calling you two out during my player grades. So be on the lookout for those.
I figured this was the case.
Yeah,
I figured this was the case. And you know what? I want to pick a bone here real quick. Normally, I am the last one to fill anything out on this stuff. Just like I was the last one to join the show. So you tried to put me on the spot here. And you were texting me a couple of times. You're like, you need to fill out your player grades. And I was like, yeah, I know. I need to fill out my player grades. And I was like, why hasn't he filled out his fucking player grades? Because I want to see what he writes so that I can get back at you. And then you somehow tricked me into doing all of this pre-work so that you can fill all these things out. And, you know, maybe it's a stick tap because you got me to get all this stuff done. But, you know, I was mad because I think the last couple of years we've done these types of things. I'm always the last one to fill it out. And you successfully figured out how to get me to do this before, you know, everybody else. But I think I will probably be the last person in your bridal party or groomsmen party to get suited or fitted for my tuxedo. So that's back at you, Ron Luce.
Yeah, touche. I got the last laugh because I figured out how to push your buttons, and I did it on purpose. And that's all that matters, because you thrive on pushing everybody else's buttons. So therefore I had to thrive on having an opportunity to do yours. For those that are curious of an instance of where that happened, our most recent one that is still out there, the Tavo Teravainen player grades was an absolute example of that, because I remember seeing those grades and I came in swinging with fists on that one because I was defending our sweet prince until the end of time. He should have never been traded in the first place. And I will stand on that hill. Gentlemen, speaking of stick taps, I have one quick stick tap, and we talked a lot about it tonight, but it's got to be brought up. The Kyle Davidson, Sam Lafferty bromance is like my favorite thing in Blackhawks land right now. It's hilarious. I genuinely love it. Kyle Davidson is to Sam Lafferty what Stan Bowman was to Brandon Saad. They can't live without one another. Their best days were together. And it's a hilarious storyline of seeing Sam Lafferty's name be acquired for a third time in 4 years by the Chicago Blackhawks while Kyle Davidson is around the ship. I think it's hilarious. Again, got a genuine laugh out of it at about 9 o'clock in the morning up in Sonoma, California on July 1st. It made my day that much more spectacular. So much so that I actually wrote an article on mobile, which doesn't happen very often. So that was cool and fun. The bromance is alive and well, and I can't wait to see number 24 skating around the ice again with Dickinson on the PK, and the TWs and hashtag grits are going to be flying like wild fireworks here at Four Feathers this year, and I'm genuinely excited for that. Gentlemen, what's on tap next after a 95-plus minute show here tonight? Whoever, it was our good friend of Cubs on Tap, friend of the Four Feathers show as well, Brandon, said this will be a short show. No, it wasn't. What's on tap next? Well, the preseason, it's kind of a joke. There is still some more to come. Obviously, the NHL schedule release will happen over the next coming weeks, in addition to any possible trades and free agent signings. In addition to that, arbitration is on the horizon as well. Soderblom being the most notable name with that. Again, still a couple of notable restricted free agents for the Blackhawks as well. Players that did get qualifying offers, Louis Crevier, as well as Wyatt Kaiser, who, in my opinion, Big Lou, Tony's favorite. And again, Kaiser, who we talked about pretty ad nauseum a few shows ago about how important of what he's going to get, and kind of it signifies what his future role is with the team. Those are some contracts that we will certainly be on the lookout for in the coming weeks. But that is about it from us here at Four Feathers Podcast. And as always, follow along on the socials at Four Feathers Pod. That's Instagram, that's X, etc. Be sure to follow along with On Tap Sportsnet as well at On Tap Sportsnet on the socials and ontapsportsnet.com. Head over to the YouTube if you aren't already. Like, subscribe, hit that little bell button. You'll know when all of our great shows go live. It's not just us here at Four Feathers Pod. You've got the Bears on tap, guys, the Bulls on tap, guys. You've got the Cubs on tap, guys, and you've got the Sox on tap, guys. Everything's covered here in Chicago sports, as well as other great sports. Shouts out to those like Joe Chats and others who cover all the other sports here in Chicago and do an incredible job for On Tap Sportsnet. So once again, ontapsportsnet.com and at On Tap Sportsnet on the socials, the On Tap Sports Network. Go and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Gentlemen, there are a few things in this world that get me as fired up to talk about sports as it is Blackhawks hockey, especially with the two of you. It was a pleasure, a banger of a show here after free agency. There is absolutely a world that we'll be back on here soon to talk about some news. And when it happens, we will be on the mics and back at it once again. But until then, gentlemen, what do you boys say? Let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks.